Hi, good day, and welcome to Rico Anime Recaps. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Albert and Franz, the children of wealthy nobles from Paris, are attending the carnival on Luna. Albert is captivated by the Count of Monte Cristo at an opera performance. While Albert tails the Count drops his watch, which Albert uses to set up a meeting with the Count. When he tries to return the watch, he and Franz are invited to dinner. During the final spectacle of the carnival, Albert is offered a chance to pardon one of 3 murderers, but randomly chooses the boastful murderer Rocca. To his surprise and dismay, he tries to lose himself for the night with a girl, but she suddenly pulls a gun on him. The girl who Albert was with Peppo reveals herself to be a member of Luigi Vampi's gang of thieves and kidnappers. Several aristocrats ask Franz, who is at a ball where Albert is, and warn him that the streets are not safe because of Vampa. When he attempts to return to his hostel, he is met by Rocca, the murderer who Albert pardoned, who demands 50 million ducats in return for Albert's life. Franz desperately tries to get the money, but is unable to and resorts to begging the Count. Meanwhile, the deadline passes and Vampa's men begin to taunt and torture Albert, but Peppo jumps out to save him. The Count arrives at Vamp. Back in Paris, Albert heads out for a picnic with his friends. He travels in his fiancée Eugene's car and the two bicker and speed ahead, causing Francis chauffeur to drive Francis' car into a ditch, but Maximilian Morel, who happened to be passing by, single-handedly lifts the car out. They converse and eat, and Morel becomes infatuated with Valentine, Francis' fiancée. When they return to Paris, Albert attempts to introduce them all to the Count, who is immediately peppered by questions. Beecham, Albert's journalist friend, tries to photo and record the Count, but later realizes that nothing has been recorded. After they leave, Albert introduces the Count to his parents. The Count of Monte Cristo stays for dinner with Albert's parents, General Fernando Morcerf and Mercedes. He converses with the general about the general's military experience. When the Count refuses to eat, Mercedes insists that he eat one of her specialties, which causes the Count to reminisce about Marseille. Peppo taunts Albert into thinking that his mother will fall in love with the Count, and he becomes fixated upon his mother's locked drawer after he sees her reminiscing over an old photograph. Albert and his friends later visit the Count's mansion on the Champs-Élysées, where they descend into the depths of his house to a city of gold. The Count gives Albert a sword. Albert, Franz, Maximilian, and Beecham visit Monte Cristo at his residence, where they meet Haydée. Albert and Maximilian almost come to blows, and Monte Cristo proposes a duel. However, when Albert slips and falls into the pool filled with sharks, Monte Cristo dives in. To save him, Albert doubts his feelings for Eugénie, and Eugénie is distressed over her father's, the Baron Danglars' obsession with finance and her mother's affair with Lucien Debray. Meanwhile, Monte Cristo visits Danglars to open an account with unlimited credit. Haydée, having seen General de Morcerf at the opera, collapses in shock. Maximilian seeks Albert's advice on courting Valentine. Madame Danglars' Péloise Villefort and her son Edward are saved by Monte Cristo's servant when their carriage horses run him up not far from his residence. Monte Cristo holds a reception for the Danglars, Morcerfs and Villeforts at his newly acquired estate in Boulogne, where he also introduces the Marquis Andrea Cavalcante. Monte Cristo claims that an evil aura in the mansion emanates from a certain room and suggests that his guests form search parties to reach it. When Madame Danglars collapses, Villefort, who is quite familiar with the mansion, runs out of patience with Monte Cristo. Meanwhile, Albert is poisoned through a water pitcher that Monte Cristo claims was likely meant for the Villeforts. The poison. Valentine remains unconscious, but Villefort is trying to keep the situation under wraps by treating it as a family matter. Sometime later, Danglars, Morcerf, Villefort, and Cadaris receive a funeral invitation from Edmondance. Franz Morel and Raoul de Chatterano kidnap Valentine to get her away from the poisoner's clutches, and Morel takes her to Marseilles. Franz suspects the Count's involvement in the poisonings, but Albert is steadfast. Crown Prosecutor Villefort, however, has already discovered that his wife Heloise is the culprit. Meanwhile, Baron Danglars decides to break off Eugene's engagement to Albert. Cavalcante is making moves on Eugénie while Baron Danglars is trying to stop Albert from attending her concert. With Debray's help, Albert manages to attend, and both he and Eugénie begin to realize their true feelings for each other. After the performance, Crown Prosecutor Villefort attempts to arrest the Count of Monte Cristo. Crown Prosecutor Villefort's plan to arrest the Count of Monte Cristo backfires. Meanwhile, Baron Danglars cuts off financial assistance to General Morcerf. Franz and Debris hack into the Ministry of the Interior's database in order to find out more about the Count. Albert meets Haydée, who informs him on how her father was the ruler of Janina, who had requested the aid of Earth when the Earth-Eastern Empire War broke out. However, the Earth reinforcements betrayed Haydée's father, labeling him as a traitor and ultimately murdering him once she and family had lost everything. Haydée and her mother were sold into slavery. She was later given a dagger by her mother to keep in case she were in any risk of serious danger. After her mother died, sometime later, an orphan Haydée encountered the Count, who eventually adopted her and took her under his wing. Crown Prosecutor Villefort is arrested for attempting to murder the Count of Monte Cristo. Cavalcanti convinces Baron Danglars to announce his engagement to Eugénie, throwing Albert into depression. Albert goes on a space cruise with the Count of Monte Cristo. Franz, continuing to investigate Gankatsu, learns about the Chateau d'If from Monsieur Noirtier. Haydée testifies before the National Assembly about General Morcerf's crimes on Janina and his role in her enslavement. February 1, 2005. Albert, having returned from space, learns of the brewing scandal around his father, General Morcerf, and believes Beecham to be responsible. However, he soon learns the truth of their heritage from his mother, Mercedes. Albert, having learned from the Count that everything that has happened so far has been planned out of necessity, challenges him to a duel. Albert meets with Franz, who has returned to Paris. Mercedes, having recognized Edmond Dantes in the Count, comes to see him, having drugged Albert's alcohol so that he sleeps in France, attends the duel with the Count in his place. Albert only arrives in time to hear Franz's dying words. Albert, upset that Franz had to die because of his parents' old love triangle, decides to leave the Morcerf household residence. However, with his status as an aristocrat revoked, he cannot even exit the town gates without having a permit. Meanwhile, Baron Danglars, facing the prospect of bankruptcy, decides to advance the plans for Eugénie and Cavalcante's wedding. With Peppo's help, Albert crashes Eugénie's wedding, and the police soon arrives to arrest Cavalcanti, who is really Benedetta, a wanted criminal. In the confusion, Albert and Eugénie escape, ending up at the airport, where they reveal their true feelings for each other and share a heartfelt kiss before Eugénie leaves for New York. Baron Danglars, in an attempt to outmaneuver his creditors, skips town with a suitcase handcuffed to him containing 5 trillion francs. However, the Count appears on the same plane demanding money from him at Crown Prosecutor Villefort's trial for poisoning and for attempted murder. Benedetta makes an appearance and reveals the truth of his real heritage with Crown Prosecutor Villefort, who is now a permanent resident at a mental asylum following his arrest. Mentally insane after Benedetta had drugged him with a poison-filled needle, and Baron Danglars trapped and naked in outer space in a drifting ship full of gold bars, only General Morcerf remains to be dealt with. While the Count recounts his backstory to Albert, General Morcerf stages a coup d'état and declares martial law in Paris, causing massive destruction all over the city. With Mercedes and Albert shot by Morcerf, nothing stands in the way of his showdown with the Count of Monte Cristo. However, the battle is interrupted when Haydée intervenes while trying to stop their fight and confesses her feelings to the Count, saying that she's in love with him. General Morcerf then holds Haydée hostage at gunpoint, and the Count orders the wounded Albert to be held hostage as well. The standoff is broken when Albert pleads with both men. However, with his orders being disobeyed for the first time, the Count, now completely dominated by Gankatsu, shoots Albert himself, but Baptistin throws himself in front of Albert and is wounded after a confrontation between Albert and the Count. Gankatsu is hauled over. Edmond Dantes is broken as Albert hugs the possessed Count and kisses the side of his cheek, which releases Gankatsu's spirit out of his body, and he finally passes away after succumbing to his puncture wound from the broken shard of Franz's sword that was still lodged into his heart and telling everyone to remember him as Edmond. Dantes as Albert Haydée, and the others flee to safety. Morcerf commits suicide, an expiation for the crimes he committed against all those he loved, including Edmond Fernand Mondego and Edmond Dantes. The Count are both dead. 5 years later, a peace treaty with the Eastern Empire is finally being signed. Morel returns to his beloved wife Valentine in Marseilles and plans to rebuild the Morel trading business. Eugene is now a world-famous concert pianist and is returning to Paris. Haydée, now attended by the Count's former servants, Petruchio, Baptistin, and Ali, and living on Janina, is preparing for her coronation. Benedetta and Cadaris are still at large. Pippo is now the top fashion model. And now, widowed, Mercedes visits the graves of both Franon and Edmund in Marseilles. Albert, now using the name Albert Herrera and having rebuilt his life, also returns to Paris to visit his abandoned family home, where he finds an old letter written by Edmund to Mercedes showing the love he had for Mercedes, before his betrayal and imprisonment, realizing that the Count has been with him his entire life. This implies that the Count is actually Albert's biological father. Later, at Francis' grave, Albert reminisces about the past 5 years and the lessons he has learned. The series ends as Albert rushes to the nearby church, where he hears Eugenie playing the song that she had written for him, and so the anime ends with it.
Thanks for watching Rico Anime Recaps. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can get more videos like this.